Okay. All right, we'll get started. So, good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. This is a joint information session, and it's a partnership between the County of Middlesex and all the lower tiers within the County of Middlesex. And we're really happy to see everyone here to learn more about being a candidate running for election. I'll pass this over to Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Paul Shipway, and I'm the county CAO from Middlesex County. And you want to introduce yourself as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. I'm Tiffany Farrell. I'm the CAO for the Municipality of Middlesex Center.
And we're very appreciative for Middlesex Center hosting us all here tonight. And thank you for everyone joining us in person and all those for joining us online. And this will be posted later. And it just is another example of how in Middlesex County we all work together to try to deliver shared outcomes. So we'll do a brief overview of the game plan tonight. And is that your slide or mine?
Yours.
Okay. So we'll go through county and local staff presentations, speaking a little bit about what's done locally and what's done at the county. And then we're going to turn it over to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for a larger in-depth presentation about the election process. And then we'll also have county and local clerk booths over in the
Community Center.
Community Center, thank you very much, where you can ask individualized questions from your specific municipality or the county. Thanks. So starting off, Middlesex County. So we currently operate out of 399 Rideout in the City of London, also known as the Old Courthouse. And some of the things that County Council and county government oversees is regional economic development and tourism. So on the regional scale, emergency management coordination. So again, we support local municipalities with that. Actually our largest service area, Middlesex London Paramedic Services, so land ambulance services, county planning and development, county roads, bridges, traffic signals, and controls. So that would be your arterial roads within the county. Human services, which covers childcare and early on, Ontario Works, and housing in partnership with the City of London. Long-term care services, so we have Strathmere Lodge out in Strathroy. Forestry and natural heritage. This one's near and dear to my heart, but the county has over 1,000 hectares of county forest that contribute to the overall well-being within the county. And then county libraries, which we operate in conjunction with the local municipalities, embedding those basic and comprehensive branches out in the community where our residents get services from.
So, when I talk about the responsibilities of our local municipalities, I'm referring to the services and operations that impact your daily lives. We look after local roads, water and wastewater services, and recreational facilities. We also handle waste collection and disposal, enforce property standards and bylaws, and provide fire protection, maintain parks, and run a wide range of community programs. On top of that, we guide community growth and development through land use planning and zoning, issue building permits, and support local economic development. We keep our public spaces clean and safe, operate community centers, and deliver cultural and recreational programming to help build vibrant, engaged communities. A key part of all of this is our commitment to customer service, as we are the closest level of government to the residents and we are responsive to the community needs as much as we can. We strive to be approachable and responsive, making sure that when residents need information, support, or access to services, they're met with professionalism and care. Our goal is to ensure that essential services are not only accessible and reliable, but also delivered with a focus on meeting the unique needs of every individual in our community. Now, building off of what Paul had just mentioned with what the county does, there are several areas where county and local municipalities' responsibilities intersect or require close coordination. For example, issues like transportation and emergency management often involve both levels working together to ensure effective service delivery and resource management. This collaboration is essential for addressing complex challenges and providing seamless services to the community. So it is important that the municipality at the local level and the county work together hand in hand.
Next up, a bit of an overview of the provincial government. So we are creatures of the province and operate under their legislative regimes, but also to provide an example of the things the province does that we do not do. And that's generally hospitals, healthcare, and health cards. Natural resources, so Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Education, so oversight of both the public and separate school systems, liquor sale and regulations, although there's some bleed with local municipalities there as well, provincial highways like the 401 and the 402, driver's licenses, community and social services. So Middlesex County or the City of London deliver some services on behalf of the province, but the province sets the rules and funding envelopes for those programs. Property and civil rights, administration of justice, so the courts. Those are some high level things that are coordinated at the provincial level.
So, it is important to clarify common misconceptions about the roles of each level of government. Sometimes residents may be unsure about whether a service or responsibility falls under the county or their local municipality or the provincial or federal level. By understanding the division of duties, residents can better navigate their local government and access the appropriate services. So, when we're talking about the federal government, they manage things like national defense, immigration, citizenship, Indigenous affairs, international trade, criminal law, postal services, and the regulation of interprovincial and international transportation and communications. It also provides equalization payments and other transfers to provinces and territories, which can in turn affect the funding available for our local services here at the municipality. The level of government and all these levels of government often intersect with municipalities. And for example, provincial policies shape municipal land use planning and environmental regulations, while federal infrastructure grants support local infrastructure, such as our roads and water. Emergency response, public health initiatives, and economic development programs frequently require all three levels of government to cooperate, ensuring that services reach residents efficiently and effectively. And by working together, the federal, provincial, and municipal governments help build strong communities across Canada. So now when we're looking at our local council. So the local council is the elected governing body of a municipality. Councils are responsible for making decisions on local policies, bylaws, budgets, and services that directly impact residents. This includes areas such as land use planning, waste management, recreational facilities, and local roads. Councilors, led by a mayor, represent the interests of their citizens and work to ensure that municipal operations align with the community priorities. Local councils also act as a bridge between residents and higher levels of government. They implement provincial directives and at times collaborate with federal programs while advocating for the needs of their communities. Through public meetings and consultations, councils encourage citizen participation, helping to shape decisions that foster vibrant and sustainable communities across Canada. When looking at our local committees and boards, a local board or committee is a group established by a municipality to oversee specific areas of community interest. Here at Middlesex Centre, some of these include the Community Services Advisory Committee, Economic Development Advisory Committee, and there's committees and boards with respect to planning matters. Members of these groups are typically appointed by council, often through a formal application and selection process, to ensure diverse representation and expertise. Their work helps to ensure that municipal decisions reflect the perspectives and needs of the community. Through their work, committees and boards assist in the development and review of municipal policies, oversee specific community projects, and help to engage residents in local governance. Their recommendations are brought forward to Council for approval, contributing to transparent and informed municipal operations. By involving citizens directly, these groups foster greater community participation and help ensure that local services and initiatives reflect the needs and priorities of its residents. Now looking at local councillors and the time commitment. Local councillors typically devote considerable time to their roles, often attending 2 council meetings each month. For example, here at Middlesex Centre, we normally have 2 meetings a month. One meeting is held in the evening and one during the day, though this schedule can differ across municipalities within the county. Councillors are required to also participate in committee and board meetings. with sessions scheduled both during daytime and evening hours. Here at Middlesex Center, by offering meetings at varied times throughout the day, our municipality does aim to engage all community members, including those who may not work the traditional 9 to 5, ensuring that local governance remains accessible and representative of the entire population. Additionally, there's other time commitments for our counselors. While not always required, counselors can anticipate calls on their time to attend community events, participate at conferences such as AMO and Roma, and respond to residents when they have concerns. Pass it back over to Paul.
Yeah, wonderful job on the local. And county council then is composed of 10 members, including the mayor from each municipality and sometimes the deputy mayor. So if you're in Strathroy, Caradoc, Middlesex Center, or Thames Center, the deputy mayor also sits on county council. Each year right now, the warden amongst those 10 members is elected and serves for a year and really leads county council. And county council generally meets twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesday at 1 p.m. Then when we look at county committees and boards, much like local municipalities, the county council also has a number of advisory boards and committees, and then also has Middlesex London Paramedic Services, which oversees the operations of MLPS, Middlesex County Library Board, Middlesex London Health Unit, and a number of external agencies. Generally, a member of Middlesex County Council will sit on 2 additional committees or boards. There's approximately 18 meetings each year on top of special ones and events. Being a county councilor is a significant commitment on top of your local commitments. So for those mayors and deputy mayors that sit on county council, it's an additional time commitment there.
So roles and responsibility of counselors. So this is guided by Section 224 of the Municipal Act. It is a very lengthy section that you would pay a lot of attention to as a municipal counselor, but I'm only going to highlight a few things that are included there. So one is the counselors act as the voice of the community, advocating for the needs and interests of residents within their municipality. They work to ensure that local policies and decisions reflect those community priorities. They also develop and evaluate the programs, policies, and services the municipality provides. They're responsible for shaping, reviewing, and assessing municipal programs, policies, and services to ensure that they meet the needs of the community. And this includes participating in decision-making processes and evaluating the effectiveness of municipal initiatives. They maintain the financial integrity of the municipality. Councilors oversee the municipality's finances by approving budgets, monitoring expenditures, and ensuring that public resources are used responsibly. Their stewardship helps maintain fiscal accountability and sustainability within your communities. Now, counselors are responsible for addressing inquiries, concerns, and feedback from residents in a timely and respectful manner. They listen actively to community members, work collaboratively to resolve issues, and strive to foster positive relationships between the municipality and its citizens.
And I think the legislative services teams from across the county have done a wonderful job putting together this presentation and specifically citing the sections of the Municipal Act. And it drives home that both as councillors, as heads of council, and as staff, we're under the direction and function of provincial legislation. So much like the role of a councillor is defined within the Municipal Act, so is the role and responsibility of the head of council. So Section 225 speaks to council, the head of council that provides leadership to council and presides over meetings. So there's a lot of fun stuff in procedural bylaws and parliamentary procedures for all our clerks in the group. And then generally works to enhance the economic, social, and environment well-being of the municipality and its residents. And then on top of that, represents the municipality at official functions and generally speaks as a spokesperson for the municipality or the county.
Now, something that's new, relatively new for many of us, is the strong mayors. So in certain municipalities, heads of council is granted strong mayor powers. Now, effective May 1st, 2025, Ontario extended the strong mayor powers to heads of council of single and lower tier municipalities with councils of 6 members or more, which for for the County of Middlesex includes the Municipality of Middlesex Center, Strathroy-Caradoc, Southwest Middlesex, and North Middlesex. Now, these strong mayor powers are intended to be used to accelerate housing, infrastructure, and transit projects. The powers allow the mayor to propose budgets, hire and fire department heads, veto bylaws not aligned with provincial priorities, and create committees of council.
And then us standing in the room, county and local municipal staff. So staff's role is generally to implement the decisions of council and administer municipal programs and services. So generally, we would work to provide advice and recommendations to to council, county council or local council, and then execute on those decisions of council. Locally and at the county level, the CAO ensures the efficient and effective operations of the municipality and generally has oversight of all the staff. The element that the CAO is generally the one employee of the council. And then within that, there are certain positions such as the clerk, treasurer, chief building official that have statutory responsibilities under various pieces of legislation that they are beholden to and they cannot deviate from those. Still me? Wonderful. Council and staff work closely to ensure the success of the municipality, and that's really where we can deliver the best outcomes for everyone is when we do work well together. And council provides that democratic representation, policy direction, political leadership, and makes decisions. The role of staff is really to be that professional administration that can bring forward objective recommendations and then allow council to apply the various lens they would like and provide direction to carry things out. Staff then manage those municipal programs and resources and provide advice to council to further refine and implement those decisions on a go forward.
So finally, school board trustees. So the role of the school board trustee, they're locally elected representatives who serve on school boards. In Middlesex County, there are 4 school boards, public and separate in both English and French. School board trustees for our region will be run for the election will be run by the municipality of Strathroy-Caradoc, the city of Woodstock, and the city of London. Check your local municipality's website for where to submit these forms. Trustees are responsible for helping to establish policy direction for the school board, ensuring that decisions reflect the needs and interests of students, families, and the broader community. They actively participate in decision making, working collaboratively with other trustees to benefit the entire school board. Through their involvement, trustees contribute to shaping the educational experience and outcomes for students within their jurisdictions. So at this point, we will open it up for any questions.
Don't everyone jump at once.
Back up for instead of on the school board. So is it something to be on every ballot, like this center will we have school boards? You said it's through Strathroy.
Yep. So I might ask a municipal clerk to answer that one. So I haven't been through the election process myself for the school boards.
So the reference to who is going to conduct the election means who's responsible for that, and it's based on a calculation that is undertaken around this time of year. And whichever municipality within that broader region of the school board has the greatest population of students within that board's schools, they're the ones that are responsible for the election. But that means that they're the ones that tell every local clerk what are the names of the nominees for each of the elections. So if you happen to live in Thames Center, for instance, and you're interested in running for the French Catholic School Board, it's not Thames Center where you would supply your nomination papers to. It's the municipality it's the City of London, I believe, in that case. But so that it's just who's running the election, and then all of that information is gathered and announced by them.
It'll be on your map.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I think seeing none, we'd just like to say thank you. It's always exciting to see civically engaged folks coming out, and we appreciate all the opportunity to provide this information. We're going to turn it over to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing right now. Jody Morrison and Spencer Fitzpatrick are here to speak about elections from the ministry perspective.
All right, so good evening, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Jody Morrison, and this is Spencer Fitzpatrick. We would like to thank the County of Middlesex and all the lower tier municipalities for inviting us and for hosting this candidate and third-party advertiser information session. So just a disclaimer, these slides are meant to be a summary of some of the sections and should not be relied on for legal or official purposes. I do want to stress that we are not lawyers and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal advice when necessary. We will not be able to cover every aspect of the municipal election, but hope that this provides you with a better understanding of the process and legislation and improves your comfort level. Congratulations for taking an interest in your community and local government. Whether you're interested in serving on a municipal council or on a school board, or registering as a third-party advertiser. Okay, so just an overview of what we're going to go through. We're going to do the eligibility rules, nomination process, campaign finances, compliance audit, voters list, scrutineers, recounts, and resources. So eligibility. Okay, so to be an eligible elector, which means that you must be able to vote, so that the list above, so the list above is the list that shows.
Yeah, so are we looking at the wrong presentation?
There we go.
So are we going through all I think we have the wrong one up. That should be the
No.
wrong responsibilities.
No, we were told to take it out.
Sorry.
I think it said 25.
Hmm. There we are.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, we'll try that again. Okay, so eligibility and ineligibility. So you must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote. So the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility as well as eligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day you are nominated, you are qualified to hold that office under the Act and are not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold office. Section 30 of the Municipal Elections Act states that a person shall not be considered an employee for this section by reason only of being a volunteer firefighter as defined in the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. If a municipal employee wishes to run for office on that municipality's council, they must take a leave of absence before filing their nomination form. Section 30 sub 4 of the Municipal Elections Act. If elected, he or she shall be deemed to have resigned from the employment immediately before making the declaration of office. An employee of a municipality who wants to run for an office in a different municipality does not have to take a leave of absence or resign, but they should check with their employer to see if there are any policies that could affect them. School board trustee eligibility and ineligibility. This slide shows the eligibility requirements for a school board trustee as well as ineligibility. Questions about school board eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. Just some things to note. If you are an employee of any school board and you wish to run for a trustee position on any board in the province, you must take an unpaid leave of absence before you file your nomination form. If elected, you must resign from your job. You cannot work for a school board and be a trustee in Ontario at the same time. The following people are disqualified from being elected as a school board trustee: a clerk, deputy clerk, treasurer, or deputy treasurer of a municipality within the jurisdiction of the board. Nomination process. So the first day to file nominations is this Friday, May 1st, 2026. Nomination day, the last day and time for filing nominations for the 2026 election, is on Friday, August 21st, 2026 by 2 p.m. Withdrawal of a nomination must be filed with the clerk's office in writing before 2 p.m. on nomination day. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all of the financial transactions made in the campaign. If you have not spent any money nor raised any funds, they can click on the box indicating so, sign the form, and it is complete. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial statement by the required deadline. The clerk must certify nominations by 4 p.m. on the Monday following nomination day, which is August 24th, 2026. Continuing with nomination process. So candidates must complete Form 1, nomination paper, and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. The clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out an additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. If you're in an award system, as long as you are eligible to vote in the municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you do not live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. In addition to the legislative requirements, each municipal clerk may establish their own local processes and procedures related to submitting a nomination. So it is important to contact the clerk so you understand the process in that municipality. Use of electronic filing for candidates and/or third-party advertisers is in the clerk's discretion. The clerk also has authority to determine what methods could be used to file electronically. Even if a clerk permits electronic filing, all campaign documents require original signatures, including the signatures endorsing a candidate's nominations, where applicable. If electronic filing is permitted, it is the responsibility of the candidate or third-party advertiser to maintain these original records until after the next regular election. Running for a different office. Occasionally, a candidate changes their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can only run for one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they have already collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use these endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign and only one financial statement needs to be filed. Unless the candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and one or both offices are elected by ward, the two campaigns must be kept separate and two financial statements must be filed. Third-party advertiser. A third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support, or oppose a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. A third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing a candidate, or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. So the 25 signatures. Municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 nomination signatures on Form 2. Ontario Regulation 101/97 provides an exemption to this requirement for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in the municipality, not just the ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the document, then they could be held accountable under the penalty section of the Municipal Elections Act. And with that, I will turn it over to Spencer for campaign finances.
Okay, thank you, Jody. So campaign finances, everybody's favorite part about running a campaign. This is going to be, I think, probably the densest part of the presentation. There are quite a few rules you want to be aware of. And we hope this section is going to give you a nice overview of those rules. Now, that isn't to discourage anybody from running. I would say I don't think the rules are too onerous, but you are going to notice a common theme kind of throughout this section of the presentation. It's around record keeping. Keeping good, accurate records is really going to help you comply with these finance rules, and especially when it comes to filing your financial statement, which again we'll talk about throughout the section, is just going to make it a lot easier. And then just so you do know, a copy of this presentation is going to be available for everybody's information if you want to refer to it later. And then as well, I'll do a quick plug now, and you'll hear me reference it throughout this section of the presentation. There is the Candidates Guide as well, which is available on our website. The Candidates Guide is a super helpful, valuable resource if you're going to be running. I would highly recommend that you do take a look at it. Go through it, front to back. It's not that long, but ton of great information. Lots of examples too for some specific situations you might run into. And then as well, the bonus at the end is all these forms that we're referring to throughout the presentation are linked at the end of that guide. So you can take a look at them, get familiar with them as well. But without further ado, campaign finances. So the first thing we'll talk about is contributions. Now, just a first thing to know is that if you are going to raise or spend any money during the campaign, you do have to open up a campaign bank account. But that campaign bank account is only required if you do spend or raise money. So if you do run a campaign where you don't spend or raise any money, you don't need to get a campaign bank account. However, you still do need to file a financial statement. Now, just generally, you are going to hear references to third-party advertisers, both in the earlier part of the presentation and in this section of the presentation. Generally, the rules are going to be the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. There's a few differences, mostly around spending limits, which we can touch on in the presentation. Now, another thing you want to be aware of is that municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. Now, this does have to be passed by May 1st in the year of the election. So, of course, that also is coming up if it hasn't already been passed. And this does encourage accountability and transparency. And it could be different in each municipality. So you really want to be aware of your municipality's policy in this regard. Now, just a quick note as well, generally, or you will see municipalities providing candidate contact information on their websites. This is not considered a contribution, so you don't have to worry about recording that on your campaign finance statement. So continuing on with contributions, you see here on this slide, this talks about who you can accept contributions from, both as a candidate and as a third-party advertiser. Just really quick, is there anybody here interested in registering as a third-party advertiser? All candidates? Okay. So for candidates, the thing you really want to be aware of is that you really can only accept contributions from either yourself, you can self-donate to your campaign, or your spouse, or individuals. You can't receive contributions from, corporations or trade unions. They can participate as third-party advertisers or donate to those third-party advertiser campaigns. But when it comes to candidates, you're just going to be accepting contributions from individuals. Now, if you are a third-party advertiser and you were accepting contributions from a corporation, some rules clarifying, what would be deemed to be a single corporation, clarified on that slide. Do take a look if you are interested in that. However, since we don't seem to have any third-party advertisers in the room, we'll just go right on to the next slide, which again is going to keep talking about contributions. So generally, you might have volunteers helping you with your campaign. Those services provided by volunteers aren't considered contributions. But if a professional, so your accountants, lawyers, if they do volunteer to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of those services must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and then considered a campaign expense. As we noted on the previous slide, trade unions and corporations not eligible to contribute to an individual candidate's campaign, although they can participate in the election as either a third-party advertiser or make contribution to those third-party advertiser campaigns. So contributions, though, we've had a few slides now talking about them, but really, what are they? So campaign contributions are going to be any monies, goods, or services given to you as a candidate or to your election campaign, or given and accepted by another person who is acting under your direction. Now, when it comes to cash contributions can only be accepted up to $25. So again, cash contributions only up to $25. Anything more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by any other method that's going to clearly show where those funds came from. Now, when it comes to fundraising functions, those are going to be events or activities, held by you as a candidate or on your behalf for the primary purpose of raising money for your campaign. Now, the price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Now, that's the first reference to receipts in this part of the presentation. Again, I was talking about record keeping, going to be really key. You've got to issue receipts for all your contributions, and we'll talk about it a bit more, but they're going to be valuable documents. You really want to make sure you keep track of them. Now, with the receipts, they do have to be issued for every contribution, and they should contain both the name of the contributor, their address, the amount they've contributed, as well as the date they've made that contribution. So how much can somebody contribute to your campaign, though? So the limit on contributions to any one candidate or a third-party advertiser, because again, the rules are generally the same, is $1,200. So that's $1,200. There's a different limit in Toronto. Toronto's got special rules all the time, but for everywhere else, it's $1,200. Now, there is an aggregate limit total that any person can donate to any number of candidates for office on the same council, and that's $5,000. So you are going to want to be aware of those limits because you do have to let all your contributors know what those limits are. And that is a requirement under the Municipal Election Act. So it might be a good idea to provide that information on your receipts. Just a thought. However, you can do it as you wish, but you do have to inform them. Now, self-funding limits. So of course, as we mentioned on an earlier slide, you can contribute to your own campaign, either you or your spouse, and it's considered to have come from the same person. Now, the self-funding limit for council candidates is based on the number of electors voting for the office, up to a maximum of $25,000. This amount does include any contributions of goods and could include inventory from a leftover or that you have left over from a previous campaign. So for example, if you did run in 2022, maybe you still have some signs left over that you want to use again, you certainly can. We'll talk about it in a future slide, but if you do have that and you are going to use them, it is going to count as a contribution to your campaign and would count towards your self-contribution or self-funding limit. Now, the formula for calculating the limit is $7,500 plus 20 cents for the head of council, and then $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for all other council offices. Now, here's an important note. The maximum amount you could possibly have is $25,000. So if that formula, whether you're running for head of council or any other of the council offices, if that formula works out to an amount that is higher than $25,000, doesn't matter, you're capped at that $25,000 limit. However, if the formula does work out to an amount that is less than $25,000, or any amount lower than that, you get whatever that formula works out to. So borrowing. So while you do open your campaign bank account, you can, of course, use your own funds to do that, but you can't loan funds to your campaign to kickstart it with the intention of getting it all back. The only way that you can reclaim this startup amount is if after the election campaign and prior to filing your financial statement, you see that your campaign has a surplus, you are entitled to be refunded contributions that you or your spouse have made to the campaign from that campaign surplus. You can't receive a loan from any family members or from any corporate accounts that you may have access to. Now, if you do get a loan, it isn't considered to be campaign income, and paying it back is not considered to be a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantee the loan and your campaign then doesn't repay all of it, the remaining balance is considered to be a contribution, since as a guarantor, you're basically providing that the campaign has the means to repay it. Keep in mind, if this does happen to you, that self-contribution limit that we talked on the earlier slide, if you do end up borrowing. And then just a final note on borrowing and loans is any interest that your campaign pays on the loan is considered a campaign expense. So campaign expenses, mentioned those a few times. You can see here just a general definition for what is considered to be a campaign expense under the Municipal Elections Act. Now, the Municipal Elections Act, Section 88.19, subsection 3, does list out 10 different items that would be considered a campaign expense, or specifically under the act it says what constitutes a campaign expense. I'll just quickly go through those items. We'll talk about them a bit more on the next slide. It's legislation. Legislation by its very nature is very dry, but with that, those are: 1, the replacement value of goods retained by the person, individual, corporation, or trade union from any previous election in the municipality and used in the current election. 2, the value of contributions of goods and services. 3, audit and accounting fees. 4, any interest on loans under Section 88.17. 5, the cost of holding fundraising functions. 6, the cost of holding parties and making other expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. 7, for a candidate, expenses related to a recount or a proceeding under Section 83. Section 83 is the controverted election section. Number 8, expenses related to a compliance audit. Number 9, expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability or a registered third party who is an individual with a disability are directly related to the disability and would not have been incurred but for the election to which the expenses relate. And then finally, item number 10, the cost of campaign election advertisements. Now, for candidates, election advertisements are covered in Section 88.3. We'll talk about those as well on a future slide, but you may want to make note of that section as well. Third-party advertisers, just for reference, they do have a different section where their campaign advertisements are explained. So, continuing on with those campaign expenses. You really do want to become familiar with those campaign expense provisions. Very critical. And again, that's going to be laid out in Section 88.19 of the Municipal Elections Act. Now, generally, campaign expenses are going to be those costs that are incurred by you or on your behalf during your campaign, are incurred by you, pardon me. The nomination filing fee is no longer considered an expense and does not have to be included on your financial disclosure form. So again, there's another reference, right, to that record keeping requirement. Now, goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses, and they do have to be reported. A receipt, so again, a receipt does need to be provided for those goods and services for their fair market value. Now, payment of any campaign expenses does have to be drawn from your campaign account, and a receipt, again, a receipt, providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. A question we do get is, hey, can I just pay a campaign expense from my personal credit card and reimburse myself? Definitely don't do that. That would be against the campaign finance rules. You need to be making these payments from your campaign bank account. Now, all expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure form. That's going to be called Form 4, and again, linked at the end of the candidate's guide. So another reason you're going to want to take a look at the candidate's guide. And it does need to be filed by the clerk. However, we'll get into those filing deadlines in a future slide. Now, with respect to campaign inventory, we kind of briefly touched on this earlier in the presentation. If you did run in the last election, you have some leftover goods, so that could be, maybe signs, maybe some office supplies, and you want to use those again, you first have to determine what the current market value for those goods is and what it would cost if you were to purchase them today. Those are then recorded as a contribution and then a campaign expense. Conversely, if you end up with leftover inventory at the end of this campaign, it then does become your personal property. And if you do want to use them, maybe in a future election, of course, you're welcome to do that. However, any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. So spending limits. Now, this is a separate calculation from your self-funding or self-contribution limit. These are also laid out in Ontario Regulation 101/97. So that's a busy regulation. There's a lot of stuff in there. And it is set out for a general spending limit. There's two. A general spending limit calculation there is on the slide. For heads of council, it's $7,500 plus 85 cents per elector. And for all other offices, it's $5,000 plus 85 cents per elector. That separate spending limit is a spending limit after voting day for parties, expressions of appreciation, gifts, that sort of thing. And that's going to be 10% of the general spending limit. But where do you get these spending limits? How are you going to find them out? So when you file your nomination, the clerk is going to provide you two, or throughout the campaign, there'll be two calculations of your spending limits that'll be provided to you. The first one you're going to get at the time of nomination, and it's a preliminary estimate, which is based on the number of electors on the voters list as it existed in September 2022. Now, the final spending limit, that's going to be based on the voters list as it exists on September 20th, 2026, and it will be provided to you on or about September 30th, 2026. Now, whichever number is higher is the spending limit, and whatever that number is, the clerk's calculation is final. Now, as I mentioned on an earlier slide, you are required to inform contributors of their contribution limits. So that's both how much they can contribute to your individual campaign and that aggregate total limit that they can donate to, other candidates in that same election. Similarly, if a third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign and does require them to file a separate financial statement in each of those municipalities. The rules are going to be the same for candidates and third-party advertisers. Also includes, as I mentioned, those filing limits, filing deadlines, and any requests for extensions and record-keeping requirements. So there are some expenses that are not going to be subject to the spending limits. Most are going to be subject to your spending limit, but the ones on the slide there won't. Now, a quick note for expenses related to fundraising functions. Expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit. But in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. Campaign events where just some incidental fundraising is taking place, that does not qualify as a fundraising function. And then similarly, if you have maybe a brochure that you're distributing to promote awareness of your campaign, and it contains contact information where people can make those campaign contributions, that also does not qualify as a fundraising function. So all of this stuff is kind of laid out generally in the campaign finance rules. Campaign finance rules can be found in the sections noted there on the slides. And again, you'll have these slides to review later if you want to refer to them. But for candidates, that's going to be sections 88.8 to 88.11, and then again 88.15 to 88.20. Over the next several slides, we're going to walk you through some of these campaign finance rules. As I mentioned, as a candidate, it's going to be really critical, very important for you to be fully aware of your responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting those campaign contributions. Now, a question we do get every single election is whether there is a requirement for you to have, a chief financial officer to help you manage your campaign finances. The answer is no. You can certainly do this on your own. However, like I said, it's just important to be familiar with the rules, be aware of what your requirements are. This, again, another plug for the candidates guide. This is where that comes in handy because it does give you a nice overview of those rules, give you access to the forms, and also include some common examples that you might run into to help you work through these rules. So again, become familiar with these sections on the slide, going to be very important. And as well, take a look at that financial statement that's linked at the end of the candidates guide. Again, that's going to be form 4 for candidates. If third-party advertisers, just for your information, it's form 8, also linked at the end of the guide there. If you take a look at that form now, it's going to help keep you organized and then get you familiar with what kind of records you're going to be keeping and how they're going to be reported on that form. You are required under the Municipal Elections Act to keep accurate records. And then, of course, also open a campaign bank account. So that's going to be something you also want to start thinking about now. But again, the campaign bank account is only required if you're spending or raising money. If you don't spend any money, you don't raise any money, you don't have to open up a campaign bank account, but you do have to file that financial form. So keep that in mind. So record keeping, of course, we've kind of been referencing record keeping throughout this part of the presentation. These next few slides are going to talk about it a bit more. You are required to keep accurate, complete financial statements during the course of your campaign. All contributions and all expenses do need to be accounted for, and they do need to be disclosed and reported by you on that relevant financial form. So again, that is Form 4. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep your campaign financial records until after the council in the 2030 election it has been sworn in and takes office. So that's going to be around November 15th, 2030, give or take. These rules apply around record keeping, financial statements, all that kind of good stuff, do apply whether you're elected or not. Just like you have to keep your campaign finance records until 2030, the clerk also must keep all their campaign finance records until after the 2030 council has been sworn in. So record keeping, maybe just some best practices that you might want to keep aware of as you go through your campaign. As I've kind of mentioned a few times, receipts, they're valuable. Keep them safe, keep them secure. You're going to need them. It may be a good practice to have a receipt that is, a multi-part form, one that you can easily give to your contributor, and one or maybe more for you to keep for your records. Might also help if those receipts are sequentially numbered. Again, it's maybe just going to help you stay organized. Again, you're going to want to, or if you are going to be opening up a bank account, you may want to look at one that provides monthly statements and provides for canceled checks. It may also be a good idea to produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit. That'll list the names of the contributors and the amounts you've received from each of them. You may also want to maintain a petty cash fund to handle those minor expenses you run into throughout the course of the campaign, and then also obtain invoices for any payments you're making from that petty cash fund. At any time, the cash that you have on hand in that petty cash fund, plus the total amount of invoices, should equal the original amount you started with. The fund can be replenished periodically, but it has to be done by a check drawn from your campaign bank account, and it should be in an amount equal to the total amount of invoices that you've issued for your petty cash fund. Now, as I mentioned, you might find it useful to look over that Form 4 now, so you become familiar with what information is going to be needed to report on at the end of your campaign in October. And again, just to really make it clear, you are required to maintain certain campaign records, both as it relates to your finances and your advertisements. Specifically for the advertisement, that's again laid out in Section 88.3 of the Municipal Elections Act. We'll talk about it a bit more in the next future slide. However, you do need to keep them for a period of 4 years. And that slide is now as it comes to campaign advertisements. Now, just so you're aware, the period for third-party advertisers to run advertisements is from May 1st, 2026, so the first day of nominations, if they do register, until the close of voting on October 26, 2026. Now, when it comes to advertisements, and this applies to both third-party advertisers and candidates, you are required to identify yourselves on signs and campaign advertisements. And then again, that is in Section 88.3 for candidates. Third-party advertisers, just so you know, it's Section 88.4. Now, this slide talks about the record-keeping requirements for campaign advertisements. So the broadcaster or publisher of a third-party or a candidate advertisement shall, so shall is a really key word there. Shall means must. So shall maintain records containing the following information for a period of 4 years after the date the advertisement appears, and shall, so again, another shall, must permit the public to inspect the records during normal business hours. So that information is going to be the name of the candidate or the third-party advertiser, the name, business address, and telephone number of the individual who deals with the broadcaster or the publisher under the direction of either the candidate or the third-party advertiser. Also need to maintain a copy of that advertisement or the means of reproducing it for inspection. And then finally, a statement of the charge that was made for its appearance. And now the best part, everybody loves this part of the presentation, the financial statement. Talked about it quite a lot already through the presentation. The requirement to file a financial statement, this is a really key piece. Not doing this could result in some penalties that we'll talk about in a future slide. However, this is laid out in section 88.25 of the Municipal Elections Act, which does state that all candidates are required to file a Form 4 financial statement with the clerk, regardless of how much or how little you spent or fundraised. The deadline to file your financial statement, so this is a key date you're going to want to remember, is March 30th, 2027 by 2 p.m. Not close of business, not, the next business day. It's March 30th, 2027 before 2 p.m. If you do feel you can't meet that deadline, you do have to apply to the courts for an extension, and you're going to need to do that prior to the March 30th deadline. Now, as I've kind of mentioned a few times, just want to stress it, if you file a nomination, you must file a Form 4. Even if you withdraw your nomination or you're acclaimed into your office, doesn't matter, you still need to file a Form 4. You don't spend any money, that's fine. You still need to file a Form 4. You can now, however, though, resubmit a financial statement. If you do notice you made some errors, you can always resubmit a financial statement up to that filing deadline. And then the clerk is required to make public a report of which candidates did file and which candidates didn't file. So people will be aware if you didn't meet those obligations. Now, with the financial statement, just some more information there. You can file your financial statement at any time after the close of voting or at any time during the campaign period, although it would close your campaign. Just so you know, that date there on the slide, December 31st, 2026, that's the official end of the campaign period. So you can't campaign anytime past that. However, you do have up until March 30th, 2027 to file your financial statement. So always maybe, if a good practice though, if you didn't, have very many expenses, didn't raise very much money, or, you were acclaimed into your office, maybe a good idea to get it in as soon as you can. Just helps, move things along when you have those types of campaigns where it's just little or no expenses have been incurred. Now, clerks are required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligations, and they will publish that report either on the municipal website or in another electronic form that the public can access. This will be done by April 30th, 2027, in the case of a regular election. There is a similar requirement for third-party advertisers. The clerk will also make public a report as soon as possible after April 30th, 2027, providing a list of all third-party advertisers that have or haven't filed their required financial statements, and in the case of third-party advertisers, also an auditor's report. Now, similar to the nomination forms, clerks can determine the conditions for electronic filing of financial statements. So you will want to check with your local municipal clerk to see if that is an option for you. Otherwise, you'll have to attend the office to file that form. Another slide about financial statements, because that's how critical they are. Now, if you do have expenses or contributions that exceed $10,000, you do need to appoint an auditor to fill out an auditor's report as well that you'll submit with your financial statement. Now, that auditor does have to be licensed under the Public Accounting Act. So just because you have maybe a friend or a family member that's, like really good with numbers, it's great. But they can't do your auditor's report if you find yourself in this situation. It does have to be a licensed professional under that Public Accounting Act. And you also want to be aware those those campaign financial statements are public documents. So they are subject to public inspection if somebody did request them. Now, when it comes to your financial statement, the nomination filing fee, it's refundable, but only if you file your financial statement on time. If you do miss that filing deadline, which again, March 30th, 2027, you do have a 30-day grace period. However, you have to pay a $500 late filing fee, which is going to go to the municipality, and you wouldn't be, you wouldn't be getting your nomination fee back. Now, just a quick note for everybody, because I know you're all going to look at the Municipal Elections Act after this. You're going to be going through there and you're going to notice the Municipal Elections Act says that you need to file your financial statement on the last Friday in March following the regular election. And you say, well, you say Tuesday, March 30th. So the last Friday in March in 2027 is actually going to be Good Friday, so that's a holiday. And of course, Monday, that's Easter Monday, so also offices are closed, which is why it goes to Tuesday, March 30th, 2027, before 2 p.m. Now, as I mentioned, if you do choose to file within that 30-day grace period, you're going to pay $500 as a late filing fee, which is going to go to the municipality, and you're not going to get your nomination fee back. However, if you did apply to the courts for an extension and were granted an extension, as long as you meet the conditions of that extension, you file your financial statement, you could get your nomination fee back. And then again, I know I mentioned on an earlier slide, but just remember, you can correct an error on your financial statement if you do notice one. You have up until the filing deadline, March 30th, 2027, to do that. So campaign surplus, which we kind of referenced earlier when it comes to the self-contribution limit. And, if you find yourself in a surplus situation. So when you're filing that financial statement, you add up all your totals, you notice you have a surplus. You must pay that entire amount to the clerk with one caveat. Prior to paying over that amount, those surplus funds to the clerk, you are entitled to a refund of any contributions that you yourself or your spouse made to the campaign. Not anybody else's contributions, just those self-contributions. The amount that may be refunded is the lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. Now, the clerk is required then, if you do have surplus monies, they will place those monies in trust for you to use if you do need them for a compliance audit. And the same is true for third-party advertisers. If neither you or a third-party advertiser do need those surplus funds for a compliance audit, the municipality is going to keep them, or the school board if you did run for a trustee. So next section, we go into compliance and enforcement. However, this is really kind of just an extension of the campaign finance section, because what we're going to talk about are compliance audits. So each municipality is going to establish a compliance audit committee. If an eligible elector does believe on reasonable grounds that you as a candidate have contravened the election finance rules, they may apply for a compliance audit of your campaign finances. The application must be in writing and must set out the reasons why they believe you contravene the rules. An application for a compliance audit must be submitted to the municipal clerk who conducted the election, and it does have to happen within 90 days after the later of the deadline to file the campaign financial statement, which could include any applicable extension, which will be covered in just a note. If you end in this situation, that's section 88.23, subsection 3 of the Municipal Elections Act. Now, if the Compliance Audit Committee does get an application, they will consider that application and decide whether to grant or reject the application, and you may appeal that decision to the Superior Court of Justice. You have to do that within 15 days after the decision is made. Now, a person who does not want to or is not able to apply to the Compliance Audit Committee may decide to commence legal action just on their own, and they would be able to do that up to November 15th, 2030. That's again when the next election takes place and when the next council will be sworn in. But what happens if a compliance audit is granted? So if the committee does grant the application, it will appoint an auditor to conduct a compliance audit of your campaign finances. The auditor is entitled to have access to all of your financial records related to the campaign. The auditor will then produce a report, which you are going to be entitled to receive. The Compliance Audit Committee will meet to discuss this auditor's report. If the report concludes that there is an apparent convention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to commence legal action. Now, important note here is that the Compliance Audit Committee doesn't have any authority to set penalties. Only the court can decide if you contravene the act. And if so, which penalties are going to apply. There are, however, some automatic penalties you may want to be aware of. There are 3 of them in the Municipal Elections Act where penalties apply automatically. So if you do fail to file that financial statement by the end of that 30-day grace period, or fail to apply to the courts for an extension before March 30th, 2027, you could be subject to an automatic penalty. If your financial statement shows that you exceeded your spending limit, you could be subject to an automatic penalty. And finally, if you do fail to turn over your surplus to the clerk when you file that financial statement, you could be subject to an automatic penalty. The penalty could be that you forfeit your office if you did win the election, and then you would become ineligible to run or be appointed to fill a vacancy until after the 2030 election. There are some other penalties you may want to be aware of. If you are convicted of an offense under the Municipal Elections Act, you could be subject to a fine of up to $25,000, ineligibility to vote or run in the next general election, up to 6 months in prison, and forfeiture of your elected office if the judge finds that you committed the offense knowingly. I did previously indicate that if you are convicted of exceeding the spending limit, you will automatically lose your seat if you did win that election. In addition, you may also be fined by the amount by which you exceeded that spending limit. So into the voters list, which I think I'm going to hand back to Jody here to take us through this section.
All right. So Elections Ontario is a nonpartisan office of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, responsible for administering provincial elections led by the Chief Electoral Officer. Elections Ontario is governed by the Election Act and the Election Finances Act. Elections Ontario does not administer local elections, but they do have a role to play in providing up-to-date voter list information to local partners. Since January 1st of 2024, the Chief Electoral Officer, Elections Ontario, has taken over the responsibility of preparing voters' lists from MPAC and will manage a permanent register of electors for both provincial and municipal elections. The voters' list for each municipal election will be prepared using data from the Permanent Register of Electors, the Register, maintained by Elections Ontario. Elections Ontario works with local partners to provide them with the most up-to-date voters list to support their elections. Voters across the province can update their information in the register for local and provincial elections. So the voters list. The voters list becomes a public document on September the 1st, 2026. As a candidate, you can request that the municipal clerk give you the part of the voters list that relates to the office that you are running for. This request must be in writing. In order to receive the voters list from the municipal clerk, you must give the clerk a written acknowledgement of the following. You will only use the list for electoral purposes and not for commercial purposes. You are bound by the restrictions set out in the Municipal Elections Act relating to handling of the voters list. You will only share the list with others, such as campaign workers, after obtaining a similar written acknowledgement from them. So candidate restrictions. You are the only person who may share the voters list. If you have given someone a copy, they are not allowed to share it further. You must keep track of who you have shared the voters list with. If you give someone a physical copy of the list, they must return the copy to you. If you share an electronic copy, they must destroy the copy and provide you with written acknowledgement that the copy has been destroyed. You cannot keep copies of the voters list after your campaign has ended. On or before the day your campaign ends, you must destroy the copy of the voters list that you received from the clerk, have any printed copies that you shared with other people returned to you and destroy them. Ensure you have received a written acknowledgement from anyone who received an electronic copy of the list that the electronic copy has been destroyed. So a written acknowledgement. Before you share the voters list with someone, you must obtain a written acknowledgement from that person. That written acknowledgement must confirm the following. They will only use the list for electoral purposes and not for commercial purposes. They will not share or give copies of the list to anyone else. If they receive a physical copy of the list, they will return it to you. If they received an electronic copy of the list, they will destroy that copy and give you a written acknowledgement that the electronic copy has been destroyed. The written acknowledgement should set out the dates by which people must return physical copies or give you written confirmation that the electronic copies have been destroyed. You must keep the records of the written acknowledgements that you have received until November 15th of 2030, when the next council or school board takes office. You must also keep any written confirmations that electronic copies of the list have been destroyed. Okay, so scrutineers, recounts, key dates, and resources. So scrutineers. Only a candidate may appoint scrutineers to represent them during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Third-party advertisers cannot appoint scrutineers. In the traditional election, where voting takes place at a poll, the DRO is in charge of the activity in the voting place, and the DRO may ask the scrutineer to leave if the DRO believes the scrutineer is not complying with the legislation. Under Section 48 of the Municipal Elections Act, in a voting place, no person shall attempt direct or indirectly no person shall attempt directly or indirectly to influence how the elector is voting. Candidates and scrutineers should respect that the DRO must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and security of the vote. So just a tip, check with the clerk to see if a list of scrutineers' rights is being given to election staff at the poll. If so, use the list or prepare your own to give to each of your scrutineers so they can learn their rights. These rights are spelled out in Section 47 sub 5 of the Municipal Elections Act. Recounts. A recount is automatic if the vote is tied. Councils have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that also allow for an automatic recount. Council still retains the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of the results. So some key dates. Voting day is Monday, October 26, 2026, between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m., unless reduced hours are set by the clerk for retirement homes and certain institutions, or the clerk decides to open voting places earlier than 10 a.m. The campaign period, so the time when a candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses, runs from the date the nomination is submitted up until December 31st, 2026. The campaign period, so the time the third-party advertiser can incur expenses, begins on the date their registration is certified. Earliest is May 1st, so this Friday, until December 31st, 2026. The deadline for filing of the campaign financial statement in the clerk's office is Tuesday, March 30th of 2027, no later than 2 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file this statement regardless of how much they spent or received in contributions. So resources. So the first few links will take you to the ELAW's website where all provincial legislation is available, including the associated regulations. You will want to be familiar with the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Act, Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and if you are running for a school board, the Education Act. The second link is to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website. From this site, you will be able to access the 2026 Voters Guide, the 2026 Candidates Guide, and the 2026 Third-Party Advertisers Guide. And then the final link there is for the Municipal World website. If you click on the icon bookshop, it illustrates a list of books that are related to running for municipal office, and they're available for purchase online. And that brings us to the end of our presentation. So we will take any questions if you have any. And up there on the screen is actually our contact information. So I am the municipal advisor for the County of Middlesex. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions like after the session. You can also reach out to Spencer. He's the senior municipal advisor. So feel free to contact either one of us. But with that, we'll turn it over if anybody has any questions.
Yes.
Yes, my question is around the requirements. I noticed last week through the was a call put out by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for nominations for the board. I also know that in the Corporations Act of Ontario, we cannot serve as a board, as a director on the board, if you've been bankrupt. So I'm not sure you can speak to this, but that's not a criteria here, and I just wonder, like, one of the responsibilities of council is a fiduciary responsibility, so I wonder if you can speak to that.
So that, like, the eligibility requirements don't include those, any bankruptcies or even having been convicted of an offense, criminal offense. Of course, if you're serving time in an institution, so a provincial or maybe a federal correctional institution, you obviously wouldn't be eligible to run or serve on council. However, declaring bankruptcy by itself is not, wouldn't make you ineligible to run for council. Yeah. Definitely. It's an interesting thing. AMO by itself, like it's a separate organization, right? So it has no, connection to the province in that sense. So yeah, they can certainly make their own rules as to who would serve on the board. Oh yeah, no, it's an interesting observation. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I know if you're anything like me, you're going to be driving home tonight. You're thinking, oh, man, I really wanted to ask this. So again, don't hesitate. Reach out to us anytime. It's fine. As I always like to say, it's free to contact us. I'm not going to charge you anything. And the very worst thing you're ever going to hear me say is no. So yeah, don't hesitate. That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For everyone I haven't met yet, my name is Marcy Ivnich, and I'm the Director of Legislative Services and Clerk for Middlesex County. I just want to thank the ministry staff for being here, Spencer and Jody. That was awesome and very informative. As a county clerk, I don't have the privilege of running an election, so I learned a lot tonight. And thank you to Paul Shipway, our CEO, and Tiffany Farrell for that introductory presentation. We will move on to the next portion of our evening. We'll have our clerk's booth set up, so if anyone has additional questions, we'll be happy to answer those.